All right, welcome back everybody to the Canon Thinks podcast. Today I have a special guest on. It's my boy David, and he is from Spain. And Spain right now is in the heat of the coronavirus epidemic, and he knows a lot about that. But he also knows a lot about the other coronavirus updates because he works in a science lab at BYU. So David, can you tell me a little bit about what's going on in Spain with the coronavirus? How is Spain handling it?
So for Spain, it's handling kind of late. Any measures that the government has been taking those measures were taken late. They did look at Italy, and they were trying to be faster in the response than Italy was, but ultimately, even at the beginning of the epidemic, it caught them by surprise. That's the reality of it, and unprepared. It is something that spreads really fast, and even the government officials at the time were saying that it was just going to be like the flu or a normal cold. Now those tweets and those videos or those messages are coming to haunt them, really, because it is proven to be something more serious when it is collapsing the healthcare system in Spain and in Italy especially. So I feel like I'm privileged in terms of this situation, how I've had access to the information, because my cousin works in Spain in a lab with viruses. He's doing his PhD in virology. So early on when this was just beginning in China, he was already concerned about the situation and he was already informing me about it. So I owe that to him. My research at BYU is more in chemistry, but my major is biology. So what my cousin sends me, I can somewhat understand, but he's definitely more informed in terms of research papers that he reads, and he also works with a different virus called vaccinia. It's different than the coronavirus, but every lab in Spain, or most labs in Spain, are now transitioning to work with coronavirus in an attempt to find a cure for, or like a vaccine or a treatment, depending on which lab.
So how much time did Italy have, or did Spain have to prepare versus Italy? Because we know that Italy basically had it the second that it spread out of China. Did Spain have that much time to prepare for it?
So it's not quite like that. So I was reading about this, and apparently there's like a really big community of Chinese people in Italy. So it kind of makes sense that it has started spreading in Italy. They also failed to use proportionate measures to fight it early on. This is something that if you fight early on, and if you take very serious measures early on, you can have the advantage. But if you take too long to put in motion lockdowns, then it goes out of hand.
So what kind of serious measures are you talking about?
So the measures that China or South Korea took seemed like very extreme early on.
Yeah, because they basically locked you in your house and the government would put food on your door. Is that the kind of measures that you're talking about?
Basically. And the thing is, it really seemed extreme when China was taking those measures or South Korea. I remember like early on when South Korea was confining people or tracing them. The key was tracing them. South Korea was very good at testing everyone, not just like those that were positive or like that were suspected to be positive because of symptoms, but anyone in contact with someone that was positive was tested.
Yeah, because I know at some point they were testing 20,000 people a day.
Yeah.
Which America hasn't even gotten close to at this point.
Yeah, and I think that was the key. In order to know the magnitude and the proportion of the threat, you need to know what you're facing is like an invisible enemy without those tests.
Right, especially because you don't show symptoms for a couple days, even if you already have it.
And not just that, like from Italy, there's like one small town in Italy where they decided to test everyone in the town, regardless of symptoms, just everyone. And they found that 50% of those infected show no symptoms throughout the epidemic. So like, yeah, you could be infected, be infecting, and not really show symptoms according to that study. So that was one of the most scary studies, that like one of the scariest things they found out. That makes this pandemic really hard to fight. Other things that make it a really big threat is the fact that it depends on who you were asking. Early on, they were saying that you take 5 days to show symptoms, 5 to 2 weeks. That's a long time. 2 weeks to show symptoms.
Yeah.
If you're already infected, if you've already been
You could travel
exposed.
half the world in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that's what really facilitated the spread of this virus is the global economy, right? And how everyone travels a lot. But now they were saying that you can show symptoms. The last thing that I read is that you could show symptoms 2 days after you're infected or up to 2 weeks. But if you really want to be sure, there is like a 2-week period where you could have been infecting. Then there is a period where you're sick. And even after you're done with the disease, when you're like recovered or when you're healthy again and show no symptoms, there was like another research that said that you could still infect for another 2 weeks.
Wow.
So that puts this in a really big magnitude of time where people can keep infecting or being infected.
Yeah, so 2 weeks infection time, 2 weeks symptoms, and then 2 weeks recovery. So it could be up to 6 weeks.
Really, the symptoms, this changes case by case. There's people that show symptoms in 2 days since they were exposed. And then there's people that show the full 2 weeks. Like they take 2 weeks to show symptoms.
But it could be up to 6 weeks.
But the thing is that the period that you're sick doesn't necessarily have to be 2 weeks either, right? There's people that I was reading that the 7th day was kind of crucial of like the 7th day of you showing symptoms. If after 7 days of being sick, you start recovering, if you make it, then you're more likely to recover from it. But apparently those 7 days are the most critical. So it doesn't have to be 2 weeks of being sick. I don't know if it's 2 weeks of actual sickness, but there are up to 2 weeks of time before you show symptoms, and there could be up to 2 weeks of you being able to still spread it even if you don't have symptoms and you think that you're cured.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's a long time, really.
Yeah. So. What are the symptoms like? Because I've seen videos on YouTube of people coughing and saying that dry, wet cough, but we know that not everybody has those symptoms. What is the spectrum of symptoms that we're getting?
There are quite a few. There are quite a few, and they're similar to something like the flu or cold. But you know, the coughing, I feel like it's more when you've already developed it and it's already becoming a pneumonia, when your lungs are already getting damaged. But they added like a runny nose as a symptom now recently, which was not thought to be a symptom, but things like a runny nose. Fever, I think, is the biggest one that, especially in the US, people are looking for. Temperature, fever. And under this pandemic, if you show symptoms of a fever, it's not that it's safe to assume, but you should stay home. Definitely, like, no matter what. But yeah, it's definitely fever. Some people said that headaches as well, or back pain. But that's more when you're even like in the hospital being treated already.
Pneumonia type coughs are just because you're like, you need to be in the hospital at that point. Like you wouldn't have those really deep, bad coughs unless you needed hospitalization.
Most likely, if you're having like the really hard coughing, at that point, you most likely are going to need a respirator or some form of medical equipment to help you with it. So that's when, at least in Spain, I believe that's when they're beginning to take people into the emergency rooms, is when the coughing gets so bad that they cannot even breathe. You know, they're having such difficulty breathing, you cannot sleep.
Right, and you kind of have to at that point because your hospital might already be full, but you can at least treat people who are showing the worst of the symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there anything you can do when you get sick? What are some of the things we know we can do to help with the sickness?
There is not much known yet. There's a few things. Mostly what they're recommending so far is rest and things like Tylenol. At the beginning, people were using ibuprofen, but then some studies or some people in France said that apparently ibuprofen makes it worse. I don't think that's confirmed though, but if you can use Tylenol instead of ibuprofen, I would use Tylenol. But mostly, you just need like rest and, well, definitely social distancing. You definitely need to stay home. Like that's the key. And if you start showing like more complicated symptoms, then ultimately you need to go to the doctor. But that's a problem in Spain, that for young people, unless you really are showing hard symptoms, really, really dry cough and like difficulty breathing, where you are gonna begin to need like that respirator, then they tell you to stay home and try to just
because they're at capacity, right? The hospitals are. Yeah. So what is the hospital situation like there?
So that's something that I've learned a lot about hospitals is that, well, Spain has public health, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's also private hospitals, but the private hospitals were not taking any cases of coronavirus because...
They weren't?
No, not really.
That doesn't seem very ethical.
Yeah, but it feels like because it's like a new pandemic, a new threat, they didn't want to, they only deal with health conditions that they know really well how to treat.
Yeah.
Because they're like a private industry, you could like probably sue them if they did something wrong, I would assume. But
right.
But if it's public health, so what's happening is, I mean, the government in Spain already passed a law that if things get really, really bad, they are allowed to take over private infrastructure, private hospitals, and use their equipment in order to...
That makes sense.
Yeah, so basically they're nationalizing, but as of yet they haven't really enforced it. What they're doing is they're using like hotels, they're using different convention centers, and they're setting up like military camps.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what they're doing so far. Really, there's out of the thousands of people that are infected in Madrid, which is the biggest area of like infection in Spain, where it spread to everywhere. Out of the thousands of people that are infected in Madrid, I believe like only 100 were in private hospitals. Yeah.
Oh.
So like really the private hospital and people in the private hospitals, they behave as like employees that are not government employees.
Yeah.
So their bosses were sending them home with autumn vacation.
Because basically
right?
it's like a separate thing.
Yeah.
Because they're not necessarily required to do it. Although it sounds like they should be if the hospitals...
Yeah.
Because I saw pictures the other day of people laying in the hospital like hallways and there's not enough beds.
Yeah.
So that would be enough reason to say, hey, we need to take over your hospital. We need your equipment. That makes sense why they'd also use the hospital. Mm-hmm. But isn't there going to be a shortage of doctors and nurses who could take care of people and respirators and all the equipment that you actually need?
Yeah, more than the actual... Well, the space is a problem, right? You need more beds. That's definitely a problem. But the thing is that many hotels, they did this voluntarily. This was not the government taking over the hotel. Oh. The hotels voluntarily said, you can use our infrastructure or space or beds to host infected people. That was really nice.
Yeah.
And then the convention centers where there used to be like conventions, I don't know, like the mobile...
No one's hosting any events.
Yeah, no one is
now.
hosting events like that, right? So those are big buildings that now they're filled with beds. And different private companies have donated money or equipment to fill those places, right? The beds, they come from like different clothing stores. I believe Zara, the owner of Zara, donated money, and not just money, but also fabrics and things like that to do that. So different people have been donating as private entities money towards that. But in terms of private hospitals, they're not really being taken over yet, but it's something that it may happen.
What are the numbers like in Spain? How many people are infected? So
as of now, there are like 39,000 people infected, but those are like, of course, the confirmed cases of, once you've tested. Is testing
rampant there yet? Do they have enough testing kits?
Yeah, so it went up. Testing went up, but...
How many people are they testing per day?
I'm not sure about that number, but even in Spain, it is still said that we're under testing, that we should be testing more, because those are the cases...
And you can always test more, right?
Yeah, you could always do... I mean, we're far from a South Korea scenario when you're testing people that are healthy just because you suspect that they were in contact with someone that got infected. Mm-hmm. So in some places like South Korea and China, what they were doing, they were using apps that if someone shows infected, it sended like a notification to anyone in the circle of that person saying that they had to stay home for 2 weeks.
That makes a lot of sense. I would love to have something like that implemented here.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you don't really know what circle that this person is coming from that you're in contact with. You don't know. All it takes is touching one door handle that some random person's touched that has the coronavirus, and you could get infected, whether or not they show symptoms.
Yep. Yeah, and then there's like different numbers of how long it lives in different materials and all of that. So like if someone coughs over something that is metallic, right? The virus could be there. I think it's like for days. It depends on which material, but even in asphalt, it's like 9 hours or something like that. So you could even have it on you bring it home on your shoes.
So it might even be worth taking your shoes off at the door, not tracking that throughout your house, just in case.
Yeah, just in case. I mean, me personally, I think that is worth being wrong, like in the excessive caution than
Well, because all we've seen is every government and a lot of people, especially here in America, who aren't taking it very seriously.
Yeah.
And they just make fun of people who are taking it very seriously. But the truth is, in a pandemic, and when the WHO says, "Hey, this is a pandemic. We need the World Health Organization says that we need to take this seriously, so we should be." I don't see any problem with taking it overboard.
Yeah. And I think it pays dividends to take actions that may seem extreme early on.
Yeah.
But if you take too long to take action, that's when this becomes a really, really nasty problem.
Right, because we're already hitting that here in the U.S. where we're what are we, maybe a week or two away from looking like Spain at this point?
Yeah. With the U.S., it's hard to know because testing was very limited for so long that it was really hard to know how bad the situation was. So the U.S. right now is third in cases. It's like a 53,000, which is a lot. Most of those are in New York, but that's because New York apparently has been testing a lot too.
Yeah, and 53,000. I mean, if you would have told us that the coronavirus would be at 53,000 a month ago, I don't think anyone would have believed you, because China was like at 50,000 for a while, and they've kind of stabilized at that point.
China got to the top of the curve of infections at 80,000, 81,000.
And then they brought it back down.
They're slowly bringing it back down. People are recovering. There are a few cases of people relapsing, which is worrisome. And
who's number 2?
So number 2 is Italy.
Okay.
Italy is
how many are they at?
69,000.
Wow. Italy's... how many deaths are they at?
Yeah. And Italy, the problem with Italy is also like how big the casualties are, because they're having to choose between who gets treated. Their hospitals are so collapsed that they need to... they're almost at 7,000 people dead.
That's crazy, man.
Which is something that...
7,000 people.
Yeah, it's something that they wouldn't have even foreseen. Yeah. There's no way, right? But yeah, and this is happening because their healthcare system is so collapsed that they had to stop taking certain people in. They had to prioritize who was worth saving at this point. They stopped doing organ transplants. They couldn't keep doing that in the hospitals. They're dedicated to coronavirus now. And
so how about routine medical emergencies? Are they able to do any of those, or are they just saying, nope, only coronavirus stuff?
So that's where triage comes in. So to me, one moment of realization of how serious this was is when I was talking to my mom in Spain, and my town was like one of the last ones to get any cases in Spain. So my town was free of cases when Madrid was already overboarded with cases. So my town is a small town. It only has like 80,000 people, 90,000 people, but it didn't have any cases for a while. So when my mom told me that in the hospital that I was born in and the other hospitals in my town, they were setting up triage centers, which is like what hospitals use to assess the severity of people that are coming ill. At that point I knew it was serious. If my town is using the parking lots of the hospital to set up triage centers to assess who they can treat and who they can't, then I knew that like in Madrid it's probably much worse, and other parts. So in Italy, that's what was happening. They have to have a person that whoever comes in, they check their vital signs, and they decide whether they have the resources. Doctors have to make the hard choice of saying, do we have the means to treat this person, or is it not worth it?
That's a crazy decision. Somebody walks in and you're like, look, man, you're already going to die, so bye. Or you're probably going to recover, so we're going to let you go home because we just don't have any resources for you.
Yeah, that's really challenging. So that brings us to the group that is also struggling in these places, like nurses, doctors. Those people are truly putting up a fight. Like everyone I talk to that I know from Spain that is remotely connected to anyone that is a doctor or a nurse, they literally say this is like a war zone scenario. Anyone that is working in a hospital, their description of it is, it looks like we're at war.
Really?
You know, just of how chaotic it is. It's just chaos.
And I imagine they're working really long shifts. They're probably working a lot of hours.
Yeah. And I noticed that Spain had another day of a lot of infections in a day. And that's because some of those healthcare professionals were being tested and they were positive.
Because that begs the question, what do you do when the hospital workers get the coronavirus themselves?
Yeah, so that's a really, really big concern right now. Because some of those professionals didn't even have the equipment to be treating in the first place. So
what kind of equipment are we talking about?
Anywhere from like face shields to any sort of mask. As for patients, the biggest thing that is needed is the ventilators or respirators. But for the professionals that are treating them, what they need more is masks. I think gloves are relatively still accessible.
So we just out of masks?
Yeah, surprisingly, that's happening. Which, again, is just something that you wouldn't even
consider. Like, it's like, how do we not have 1 billion masks just sitting around?
And a big problem with that happened prior to the pandemic hit Spain. People were already getting scared and they were buying masks in bulk. Panic buying masks.
Yeah, because the same thing happened here.
Yeah.
So is there just people sitting at home with a bunch of masks?
Technically, if you're doing that in Spain right now, you're doing something illegal.
Yeah.
Because the government, the thing that they issued where they required everyone in Spain that had any medical equipment to notify the government that they had it, in case the government needed it. No, like they could dispose of it. You know, so if you have packs and packs of masks at your home because you bought those, right now it would be illegal. And if you are a decent person, you should tell the government, hey, I have this many boxes of masks.
But even then, you're just making a small dent into the amount of supplies that are needed.
Yeah, but the thing is, a lot of people did that. You know, a lot of people bought masks. It was a problem early on in the pandemic or early on in Spain because there were masks that were needed for not just for the coronavirus. Like people needed masks for other diseases to treat other things.
Even just the common flu.
Yeah. So people that really needed masks, suddenly they would go to the pharmacies and they would be out of masks. So that was a big problem early on. And then that's why people started saying, well, really the mask doesn't even protect you from getting it. It's only for the person that is already infected. But a face shield and things like that, apparently for the nurses, is something that they need and could help them. So the face shield is like, it only has like a rubber band, some plastic thing that covers like your forefront, and then the white transparent plastic that covers your face. So those things.
Does that dramatically reduce the amount of chance of getting coronavirus, or just helps a little bit?
I think it will help a little bit. I don't say.
I guess you just got to take any measure you can get to prevent
at this point
your staff from getting
it. So you get an idea of how crazy the face shield thing is.
Yeah.
So my uncle has a 3D printer in his home, and they made a group on Telegram, which is similar to WhatsApp. It's one of these apps to text, and you can get big groups together of thousands of people. And they put up together a Telegram group for 3D printers. And those who have 3D printers and enough materials to use on the 3D printers have been voluntarily making pieces for face masks. Some people that have really good 3D printers, they've been even making respirators.
Wow. Respirators out of 3D printers?
Yeah.
Aren't there just big companies that are making respirators and masks? Like, why can't Why can't society just make them, or companies?
There are some companies like that. Well, even China now that is recovering too, has been sending respirators.
Yeah, I saw that they're sending respirators all across the world right now.
I know they send a lot of supplies to Italy, and they're sending to Spain too. I saw like the embassy even tweeted about it.
I hope that that's more of a empathetic gesture to other people and to countries, and just say, hey, we went through this, here's resources for you. I hope it's not China saying, we're going to take advantage of the situation, make as much money off of it as possible. Because that's what's going on in the U.S., right? You have all these companies who are saying, I'm going to make these masks. I have the patent. You guys can't make them.
Yeah, and that happened in Italy. In Italy, one of those companies that had a patent for the respirators sued the Italians that were using their 3D printers to make respirators at home.
That's crazy.
Which is insane, yeah.
Yeah, you'd think for just the common goal of society itself to stay alive and to not let all these people die, you would just let them do things. But it's like, nope, got to get that money first, right?
Yeah, even at the brink of collapse.
Right, because all these
companies.
Yeah, it's all about profit.
Yeah, and I saw some ridiculous numbers. I don't know how true they were, but like a mask from the private company that would sell it to the government, let's say, or to the healthcare system in Italy, would be like somewhere in like 10,000 euros. But you could make that with a 3D printer and it'll cost you what the material is, €1. You know, so ridiculous, right? And they prove to be also effective. Like the piece that they make with the 3D printer proves to work. So I don't know how Italy is going to deal with that situation with that company, but they are still getting help from China. They got like a bunch of supplies, and so did Spain. But the fear is that if at this rate of contagion, it's still not going to be enough, you know?
Right.
So there's been a lot of like comparison. What did China that work versus what European countries are doing that is not working?
And what is America going to have to do in the future?
Yeah.
Because we're basically just a little bit behind Europe, and we're way behind what China was doing.
Yeah.
I kind of want to shift gears into the U.S. government's response to this, just so we can kind of bring it back home because all my listeners are American, not many of them are from Europe. But what do you think about how the U.S. has done with the response? Because, for example, I'm still working half days at work. BYU's campus is still open, at least partially.
Yeah.
Most people are still at work. They're telling you to stay at home, but it's like, well, how am I going to stay at home if I don't have money, right? Because a lot of people are paycheck to paycheck in this country. You can't just expect people to stay home for a couple months and they're going to starve, right? They're not just... I've seen some mortgage, like in some states, mortgages they're delaying your payment, but that only goes so far because most people are still renting. Have they done anything like that in Spain to encourage people to stay home? Like, are they sending money? Because I've heard some of the senators saying, like, proposing bills saying $2,000 a month for each American to stay home. Because you have to encourage people to stay home, but you also have to discourage them from going out. So all they're doing is discouraging people from going out, but they're not really saying like, hey, we're going to give you money if you stay home. Yeah. I think that would be super good if they implemented something like that.
I agree with that. I really think that if you want to really motivate people to stay home, you need to give them an incentive like that. Because in Spain, that's a problem. The government said they were gonna use 200 billion euros towards economically helping this crisis, but the month is coming to its end. People still don't know what they're gonna get. So it feels like that money is more going to big businesses than, how they're gonna redistribute that money doesn't seem like small businesses doesn't seem that they're.
Yeah, I don't think trickle down economics is gonna work in this case.
Yeah. So I think the U.S. any news that I saw looked to me like the government was just gonna throw money at the problem, like a lot of money.
Yeah, like $2 trillion at big businesses. That was the Republican plan that got shot down on Monday. But then the Democrats were like, hey, all this money is going to giant corporations. Like, we literally have millions of Americans right now who are saying, where am I going to afford my groceries? Like, I got fired, or I got laid off, or my work says don't come to work. And it's like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, and that is a problem. That is a problem that if you cannot count on your government to give you those incentives or help you out through this, it's really hard for an individual to make the conscious decision of, I'm staying home, and some people cannot even do that.
Right. And then you see people go to the beach in Florida for spring break.
Yeah, it's just so ridiculous.
Plus, it's just you even watch Trump in his things. Like the other day, somebody said that Mitt Romney was staying in isolation, like he was staying home for social distancing. He wasn't going to go to DC to vote on the bill. He was going to do it from home. And Trump like chuckled and was like, he basically was like, LOL, Romney has coronavirus. And it's like, well, first of all, he doesn't, probably. Second of all, you should be doing that too. All you're doing by making fun of people is telling the rest of America that this isn't a big deal and we should just go do whatever we want.
And people catch on those things. You know? They look for what their leaders are doing too.
Yeah, of course.
So you need to be an example. And there's a very different approach in different leaders, right? England did it really bad early on, so people may not be taking it as seriously because their government was not taking it seriously either.
Right.
But
in China and South Korea, they said, hey, look, we are going to quarantine the entire city. We're going to shut everything down. We're going to deliver food to your door. Yeah. We're taking this as seriously as possible.
So a lot of people say that this is because China it's not the first time they face a pandemic like this. They had to face SARS before, and they learned from it.
Oh, so they were prepared for it.
So they were more prepared. So when this started to happen, China first shut down the Wuhan region, I believe, and that was like, the first thing they shut down was 11 million people. 11 million people is a lot of people, but for China, that's 1% of their population. So the surroundings of that region could still produce and send supplies and make masks, make anything that they needed, food or whatever.
Right,
so those people were covered. They were staying at home, but they were covered by the rest of the state.
Yeah, because they're just isolating one area, and then everywhere else is able to send support in.
And then as a way of contagion, they expanded the area to 60 million people, which around was like 4% of the population. Big deal, right? That's nothing for China. That's where Spain failed. Spain only has 46 million people. If you close down the entire country, it'd be great if you could receive help from other European countries, but the European Union doesn't necessarily work that way. And every country in Europe is having to deal with this issue because they didn't do with Italy what China did with Wuhan. If Italy had been completely locked down, not just by the Italian government, but by the European Union, if the European Union had forced Italy to close those borders, which I don't know really how much power the European Union has over that.
But that almost goes global, right? Like you have NATO go in, or you have like you just have, you have to have America involved, which at some point it's like America doesn't care, but you also have China and other countries just say, look, we got to shut down this country. Yeah.
So if Europe had done that, shut down Italy, put Italy in quarantine early on, and then send them help, right? You cannot just shut them down and then you need to be like, okay, we're shutting you down, but we're sending help. That's how Wuhan recovered.
So it's almost like if you shut down the state of Washington, and then every other state sent help.
Pitches in, yeah. In the U.S., that's how it should have been.
Yeah.
Washington, maybe even California.
Shut down New York, California. But I mean, even California, they're shut down. People still going to the beach right now. People aren't taking it seriously.
And that is the problem. People need to shift gears and see this as a war. Because it is what it is.
But why should they, right? Because let's just take this other perspective of a regular Joe, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to work. I'm young and healthy. I don't show, like, maybe I'm not going to show symptoms, or maybe I'm just going to get a mild flu.
Yeah.
Like, what is the reason? Like, what are the big scary numbers that we need to be in mind of?
So, for me, it's what I've learned is how hospitals work. I was not that aware that hospitals really normally are almost maxed out in capacity.
Aren't they like 90% at capacity in America already before the
coronavirus? I heard something like, I mean, I'm sure it depends on which hospital, and it's a case by case or a state by state, but it seems like
but it's not like hospitals are empty.
Yeah, exactly. So if you think about that, hospitals are not just empty. They don't have that much room to fight off a pandemic. Then you start thinking, okay, so if this hits hard as it's hitting in Europe, those hospitals are going to collapse. Because that's what's happening in Spain and Italy. Their hospitals were already almost maxed out, 90% capacity. You bring in all of these cases of coronavirus. There are cases that are not going to go overnight. They're going to take weeks at the hospital. They take a long time. So for a while, your hospitals are going to stay collapsed. So then, if you're an average Joe, you were saying, right, you need to think that it is in your best interest to try to social distance, to try to stay home. Because if you contribute by getting infected and spreading it, it may so happen that you will need to use a hospital, maybe not even for coronavirus. Maybe if you're healthy, you'll recover from it, at home with Tylenol, and you'll be fine, maybe. But I mean, there is still young people that are struggling with it. But even if you're not one of those, even if you're lucky and you're completely fine with Tylenol, you may eventually need a hospital in the foreseen future. Your appendix may need a hospital. You may get your appendix removed. You may need to go through other type of surgery that you were not even.
If your appendix bursts and the hospital's full,
yeah,
what are you gonna do?
You're not gonna be able to be helped like you would if.
You might have to wait a couple hours, or.
Yeah, or who knows? Who knows? Right?
Like, home surgery.
It's gonna depend on what hospitals are available and how bad it gets. So you need to contribute to make this the least bad possible, really. But even if this is just if you were to do it selflessly, just for yourself, but you need to think of other people too, right?
Right.
Maybe not just your grandparents, other people's grandparents, or
and you have to think of all the people who might get it, and if because I mean you could be younger and get the coronavirus and you might need the hospital, but if they're like, well, we are already full, just go recover at home, you could still die at home.
Yeah, or at the very least you will have 2 miserable weeks of pain. So, I mean, it's not going to be
a
pleasurable experience. Yeah. Right. So all those people that were going to Florida on, spring break and be like, whatever, I don't care about coronavirus, I'm young. I saw that a lot of people got infected from that. They're not going to have that much fun.
Plus, you have to just consider that there are a lot of people who are 60, 70, 80 and up who are scared right now. They're scared that they're going to die from this disease, and the hospitals are going to be full, and it seems like nobody cares. Our government doesn't care, and you're just going to die or you're going to have to stay at home for a year, because the best way to social distance is to completely isolate yourself, which I have heard of people doing right now. Is, hey, look, if I can't trust anybody else, I can trust myself.
Yeah, it's just hard to fully depend on people's individually to make the choice.
Of course.
But it is coming to that in places like Spain.
Yeah, and it's not like you can fully isolate. I mean, unless you have a year's worth of food supply at home, you're going to need to go out and grocery shop, and you might get infected there. Or
yeah, but you need to think of it as like anything you can do to limit your exposure to anyone else, you're already helping,
Yeah.
So in as much as you can, you should stay home. Ideally, you should also try to buy, enough supplies to last for, maybe if you were just buying supplies for the week, try to do it for 2 weeks. Try to plan ahead that way, but not fall into the panic buying of supplies for a year, because
I mean, you don't need a whole case of toilet paper.
Yeah, you need to leave supplies for other people. You also need to be conscious about that.
Right, because among the social distancing, is that every choice that we're making right now does impact other people.
Yeah.
If you buy double the amount of eggs that you buy, maybe another person might not have eggs.
Yeah.
Just because we don't know, the supply chain, how things are going. I mean, toilet paper, I went to Walmart the other day, and there's still no toilet paper. What are people doing?
Yeah, not just that, but also disinfectant products.
There's no Clorox wipes, there's no bleach, there's no masks, just regular masks for painting or whatever that they're normally have at Walmart.
Yeah. So really you need to be conscious, not just for your own sake, but for other people's too.
You need to remember the community.
Yeah. Because you don't know when you're going to need that hospital, and you don't want that hospital to be full of people with coronavirus, or maxed out and collapsing on people, or doctors getting infected like it's happening in Europe.
So what are the numbers if things, the projected numbers for America? How many people are going to get the coronavirus, and how many people are probably going to die if things keep going as they are?
So the thing is, governments were already assuming that 70% of people get it in this season, whatever that season means, this whole year, or at least the flu season per se, right?
Yeah.
So 70% of people were going to get it.
70% of Americans, or just the world?
I think it was the world.
Wow.
Because I believe that was the World Health Organization that was saying that 70% could get infected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at 70%, that's where the curve came in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And beating the curve meant spreading that infection in as much time as possible, so that your hospitals don't collapse or your infrastructures are not filled with people infected to where you cannot keep up.
spread that, because 70% would be 200 million Americans, more or less. So if you could have 200 million people over the span of a year, would obviously be much better than 2 months.
Yeah, and you need to spread it in a long time because people stay infected for 2 weeks. So you need to keep in mind that if 70% of people get infected in 2 weeks, everything collapses.
Yeah, which is what happened in Italy.
Yeah, and similar to what is happening in Spain, people getting infected too quickly. Spain is not really beating the curve, nor is Italy. Very few countries beat the curve, and that's China, South Korea, and I don't know if there's any others. But
what's the death rate looking at then? Because if we don't beat the curve, which we aren't, then the death rate's going to be much higher than 2%.
Yeah, and that's scary because the articles that I was reading, there was one from the Washington Post that said, with no action taken or the current actions, 2.2 million, which sounded like catastrophic.
2.2 million Americans?
Yeah, that's sounded like insane. Catastrophic. That is much higher than the 2% mortality that this thing has. Definitely much worse than flu or cold. And then the scariest part was that even with measures, China-like measures, or trying to get close to what China was doing, it was only cut in half to 1.1 million. So it's like basically assuming that's going to happen. So
and
that
it's
is
not
terrifying.
And it's not like our infrastructure, like even our death care industry. I mean, we have, they probably are 90% capacity, right? But at some point, they're just going to run out of room. Funeral homes aren't going to be ready for it.
It's
cemeteries aren't going to be ready for that. Like, there's just going to be a bunch of bodies everywhere.
Yeah, that's a problem that Italy is having. They cannot keep up with burning bodies. That's a problem that Spain is having. Now the military is involved taking care of the bodies.
What are they doing? Are they just burning them?
Yeah, I think they're... It depends on the case and everything, and I think Italy was burning, but so Spain, the burying and stuff like that is done by the military now, and they even tell you like how they're doing it. Right?
That's some dystopian stuff right there.
Yeah,
the military burning civilian bodies.
Yeah, if you start needing military, but the military have been doing a lot of things in Spain as of now.
What else have they been doing?
They set up medical camps, military medical camps. They've been patrolling. They've been deployed in different towns to try to control people from going out. But mostly what they're helping is with things like the bodies and with different parts of
stuff that nobody else can really do.
Or
they just need hands to do them.
Exactly, you just need people, and the military will take a resource.
I'm sure we'll start getting action from our National Guard then in every state with that.
I saw that the National Guard was being deployed already. Some states were asking the government.
Not in every state yet, but definitely
not in every state, but. Yeah, there were some states that were asking the government for help from the military.
Do you think we'll get to the point of China where it's like the military, like I'm talking like military lockdown style in America?
I just think that's hard to do in America, and I believe that a reason why the Washington Post published that scary model, that statistical model that predicts so many casualties, is because the way America works, the way the American mentality works, it's all about freedom. You don't tell me what to do, type of thing. I'm free to do whatever I want, and it seems like Americans don't really like the government telling them what to do.
It's much more individualistic, and it's much less trusting. Of course, it is hard to trust the government right now, but even back 200 years ago, right? Like, don't tread on me. Like, we've always had that idea of, I can't imagine a military lockdown of American civilians. That would be something very anti-American. But also something that's very necessary unless you want to have 2 million people die.
Exactly. So that's the thing, right? Capitalism was working very well. Well, it was working, but under a pandemic, it's failing, right? You're going to have a lot of economic impact of this pandemic, when different sectors are stopping completely, and by those sectors stopping, they're affecting other sectors that now also have to stop. So it's almost like a domino effect, chain reaction, however you want to call it, where everything is slowly stopping, and the few things that remain open shouldn't. They should also be closed, because people should stay home at this point.
Right. Well, because all we have right now, I mean, ideally what I've heard is like you keep grocery stores open, you keep hospitals open, and that's pretty much it. But even with grocery stores, it's not like, I mean, you still have regular people working. Yeah, and you have truck drivers who are driving across the country. Plus, it's not like we make everything we have here. We import a lot of goods.
Yeah.
And you can't just totally stop that unless you shut that off completely as well.
Yeah, that's where it really becomes challenging. But if you want this to last the least amount of time possible, ideally people should stop.
So probably if we had like a lockdown, probably like a couple months, right?
Yeah, I would say at the very least a month.
Probably 3 months, up to 3 months.
Spain's been locked down for a few weeks. They've already extended it till April.
Let's say that doesn't happen though. Let's say that people just continue to be doing whatever, like the U.S. government takes really slow action, and they just keep pretending like it's not that big of a deal. How long could this pandemic last? Years?
Yeah, some people are saying that it'll most likely by the end of this year we'll still be dealing with it. Like it'll take the whole year to keep dealing with it, and then it is just a speculation whether this virus will become seasonal like the flu. Some people are saying that this is going to reshape the way we travel completely for the rest of history, right? Like it's going to reshape it. Some people are comparing this to 9/11 in terms of maybe from now on, if you want to travel to a different country, when you arrive to that country, you have to go in quarantine for 2 weeks.
And we screen for all the diseases that are out there. I mean, that would make sense, but that's just extra security. That's
it's going to be a pain. So these are just predictions and speculation, but it kind of makes sense that this could like really reshape the way we travel.
Well, it does. I mean, we've never had an event this big since 9/11, at least in this country, right? I mean, we've never had where people even, because we've been in wars and stuff where it doesn't necessarily affect the day-to-day life, but nothing has affected day-to-day life like this since 9/11 in this country.
That's exactly right. So it is going to affect a lot of industries and a lot of sectors, but especially travel. I could see that happening where suddenly, because China is recovering, right? But they're not just going to let people in now.
Yeah, of course.
They're going to have to keep like everyone that wants to travel now to China has to stay for 2 weeks.
Well, and then we have to talk about what's really scary is that people in China right now are getting it a second time.
Yeah, and I believe it's not even just in China, but some of the recovered people, I don't think the cases are very significant yet, but the fact that
it's something to watch for
is something to definitely watch for. And
what do we know about that?
I read that like if you relapse with coronavirus, your chances now of dying instead of a 2% out of the people that relapse is 15%.
Why is that?
So I believe it's probably because your immune system got compromised in the process, or the damage caused to your lungs was already severe. So that pneumonia, it's hard to heal. There's even people questioning or wondering, some medical professionals, whether the scarring that you get on your lungs from coronavirus, whether that's long lasting or whether how well your lungs will recover from it. And those are questions that we cannot answer yet. There's something that we're going to have to see.
Yeah.
We can predict more or less, but it really depends on each person's immune system at the end of the day, because it's your immune system fighting this disease. As long as we don't have a vaccine, that's just how it is. Once we have a vaccine, that's just a way of training your immune system to fight it. But more than a vaccine, I think what realistically we should be looking for in the short term is treatments. There are some treatments that are working. One of them was with the medicine that is being used for the malaria, and I think it's called, in Spanish it's called chloroquine or something like that, and it's proven to be effective against this. But it's a treatment. It's not something that prevents you from getting the virus. It's not a vaccine. So
yeah, because nothing will quite prevent it like the vaccine.
Yeah.
How far out are we from the vaccine? Because I haven't heard much about that lately.
There were like a lot of places that had promising results with the vaccine. The problem with the vaccine is that even if you have good results, good testing on like rats or monkeys, different mice, but in order to start using it on humans, there's a lot of trials that you
have to be at like 98% complete, right? In the high 90s before you start trying it on humans.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of procedures and a lot of regulations that you have to go through. In a case of emergency like this, I assume that governments are gonna skip some steps.
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to be a little more lenient on.
And be more lenient with that, and I mean that's the main focus right now. But still, early on in the pandemic, they were saying that you realistically shouldn't expect a vaccine earlier than 12 to 18 months. So the vaccine is more.
So basically, no matter what, everything's going to have to happen the way it's going to happen, and then probably after we'll get the vaccine. Like once everything's kind of divvied down, we'll get the vaccine.
So that's why I'm looking forward to treatments more realistically than the vaccine at this point. but it would be great if some country or if somehow promising vaccine got passed and
I mean, if there's anywhere that's going to do it, it'll be China, right? China has the best distribution. They have, I mean, they're much less lean, like they don't care about their people as much. They're more likely to just to say, hey, this prisoner of war who's in our internment camp, here's a vaccine for the coronavirus. Hope it doesn't kill you. If it doesn't, we're going to start giving this to the other guys.
Yeah, I would assume so. Germany also has some promising results apparently with the vaccine,
but it's still 12 months away regardless.
But if they have to go through all the trial and testing, it'll still take some.
So is there any other treatments right now that we know of besides the malaria?
I only know that
which isn't going to be very easily accessible.
No, I heard that. Well, their stocks for that medicine went up a lot.
Of course they did. Welcome to America.
Yeah, and people in America were already kind of like panic buying that medicine. So I don't think it will be super accessible. And I think the cases that were tried with that treatment I think it was in France, and they recovered 100%.
Oh wow! So that could be something then.
So yeah, it could be something. But yeah, it will be a problem if it's not available for most people. Like if most, if that vaccine is just not mass produced or something, or not vaccine but treatment.
So we touched on this a little bit before, but I wanted to end with this. What are some of the optimistic policy changes or just worldwide changes that we can look forward to? Like, what do you think will be good that this coronavirus will create in the world?
Well, to me, what really motivates me from this is all of the unity that is created, at least in Spain. People in Spain have been very divisive politically, and they were very far apart. Their ideologies super conflicting. If you were like far right,
because you had communism and fascism in your own elections recently, correct?
Yes, you had a party that is far right, and then you have your standard right wing, left wing. You have the Communist Party, and the current government is a coalition between the socialist government and the communist party.
Yeah, and we have that here too, right? We have a lot of people who just are very one-sided, either Republican or Democrat.
Yeah.
So you think there will be more unity just as a community, as a country from this?
That's what I'm hoping, right?
I think so too.
And I've been seeing a lot of that. People in Spain on lockdown, they go, well, it's for everyone's good to stay home. So people from all ideologies are doing their best to motivate each other to stay home, to keep this quarantine, to not break it. So in Spain, basically every day or every 2 or so days, people decide on a time and they go out of their balconies and clap in favor or in support of the healthcare professionals like nurses and doctors that are doing long hours and long shifts and risking basically getting this virus just by treating people.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So to me that's something that really gets me emotional, because it's really cool to see people from all sides of the political spectrum that would normally hate each other kind of come together and clap in unity, for the people that really are helping, which are those doctors.
People on the front lines.
Yeah. So to me, that's really cool. That really brings unity. And I just hope it does something similar in America too, where people...
We've gotten so divided.
Yeah. And you want people to behave more as a unit, more collective, like in China,
I wish that we could be somewhere in between a collective whole, like China, and have our individualism. Because individualism is, of course, what's made America always such a great country to be in. But I feel like we used to have it more where we as a people, less than me as a person.
I believe so too. I believe like in the past, I don't know, America had a stronger sense of unity.
We came together with World War II. I think we could maybe see similar action with fighting, instead of fighting Nazis in Japan, we're fighting the coronavirus, and we're fighting hopefully even climate change. I hope that this inspires people to come together and say, as a people, we want to fight climate change. And hopefully also more workers' rights and better healthcare, all those other things that can follow with it. Because I think the healthcare system will collapse here. It's only a matter of time. I mean, we can just look at Europe. We can say, hey, we don't want these insane insurance premiums. We don't want to, we want better healthcare, and we want it cheaper for everybody. We want it more accessible. I think those are all reasonable goals to come out of this.
Yeah. Another good thing that's coming out of this is, well, some people are using this time very productively and trying to find themselves you have to stay home for 2 weeks.
Or more.
It's good, or more, right? The best thing to do is to try to make the best out of it and work on yourself. So I'm feeling like a lot of people, when this is over, when we beat this and we get to go out again, at least in Spain and here probably soon too, once the quarantine is over, I wonder how many people will have maybe found themselves and realize that maybe the life they were living, maybe they want to live something different. They want to do something different.
This will give some good time to just reflect on yourself, do some introspection, say, because why do we work 40, 50 plus hours a week? Well, maybe we could focus less on work, focus more on our families, because everyone's staying home with their families, focusing on our bodies, focusing on health, eating well, because I have more time, so I've been able to cook more food. Mm-hmm. I've been starting to do yoga, starting to try to meditate, all these things that I'm just doing because I'm stuck at home. I have all this free time. Yeah,
and I heard a lot of people that are doing what you're doing, right? Especially meditation. And I'm already hearing a lot of people within my circle that say, actually, this meditation that I started doing because of this quarantine is helping me. Not just deal with the quarantine better, but also, be more at peace with myself or more content with myself.
Yeah, I think we just all get caught up in the world. Yeah. And this is a good chance to be like, reflect on, this is the world we live in, but how can I be more than that? How can I reflect on the world that I live in? How can I make my life better? How can I just be a better person because of it?
It's funny because I hadn't thought about this, but there's this comedian from Spain. They were talking about how the people that are taking a really big hit from this, and you wouldn't expect, is famous people, because they are so used to constant attention, and now they're locked in their homes and they don't have all of their fan base constantly, giving them the daily dose of attention that they need. And people, some famous people you've probably seen, they're trying to do streams on the internet to, I think Madonna did one.
I saw Gail Gadot singing on her Instagram, right? And everyone was mad at them because I think it brings back to that perspective of celebrities just don't matter.
Exactly.
We give them meaning.
Yeah.
And we aren't giving them meaning right now because they're not on our TVs.
That's exactly what's happening. So some of the celebrities are trying to get their daily dose of,
their fame.
Well,
because they're used to having, they're used to being on TV on those late night shows, and that's just not happening.
They're used to the constant attention of everyone. And now they're going, they're streaming things, and they don't get that many people that are tuning in. Because people are doing other things.
Yeah.
Even though they're locked down, they don't know.
Hopefully they're doing better things, but
yeah. So it's really funny how famous people are not having a good time with this either. Yeah. Even though they have the biggest homes to quarantine themselves.
I know, they're all crying in their $1 million mansions, wiping away their tears with $100 bills.
Oh yeah. So hard life in quarantine. Please stay home, but then your home is, yards of.
My private chef went home to quarantine. It's welcome to the life for the rest of us, right?
Yeah, some people. That's a good point too. Is there's the people that have to quarantine in a small apartment, and the people that can quarantine in a mansion with a private gym and.
That's got to be hard though. I mean, it's a lot. I would imagine it's a lot easier to quarantine in your own space than your giant multi-bedroom mansion where, I don't know. I guess I would feel a lot more lonely if I was in a giant mansion by myself.
That's true. You may find yourself.
Hopefully that those celebrities also get that reflection on themselves. Maybe they think, maybe I don't need to be as famous. Maybe I don't need to worry so much about my Instagram followers, right? Life matters more.
I just find this so poetic that something as tiny as a virus completely wrecks our entire planet, and people are locked down at home, and all those famous people that thought that the world revolved around them, they are realizing no one gives a shit about them, and people just want to live through this. And people are just more worried about the coronavirus and surviving this than, your idols that you may have had before you had to go on quarantine. And
should we end on that? Yeah, that was pretty good. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Retrieve the bomb and hit those targets. You've got the bomb. Get to the target. Planting the bomb. Secure the area. Our bomb is set. Hold that position.